Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis Cox with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to bring us our new moon forecast. So we have our new moon this Friday. It's going to be at 10:39 a.m. in Pacific time, and we are having this in the early stages of Taurus, and sidereal Taurus. So first of all, Taurus is just where we're really wanting to find comfort and ease. We're wanting things to take care of our needs, take care of our physical needs in comfortable, beautiful, harmonious ways. So, food, growing food, eating, cooking, making our space beautiful and things like that. And then also just connectivity with other people and allowing that all parties can have their needs met. So this is a theme of Taurus in general. And I've been talking about this a lot because Venus has been in Taurus in her own sign. So we've been experiencing some of that ease and some of that grace. Of course, Venus went retrograde last week along with Saturn and Jupiter. So there's been some adjustment here for us as we start to reflect a little bit more on what does make us happy, on how we relate to other people, maybe even on the way in which we've been, maintaining our space and our gardens, if we have them, or our cooking, all the different ways we've been experiencing this Taurus energy. We're really starting to think about it. Because this new moon's ruler is retrograde, this is going to be a cycle where we see less forward motion. So the general outcome or results that we might see when we have a Taurus cycle are going to be more internalized, just like when the planet's retrograde itself. So instead of seeing results in our outside life as we might have been experiencing, we're going to see ourselves just really thinking more, questioning, wondering, not necessarily doing as much. And this is really important to understand about retrograde planets, that there's a lot more internalization of the energy than output or external results. And this is not, of course, the only planet that's retrograde. We have Saturn and Jupiter also retrograde for a much longer period of time. So we're going to see that in many areas of our life, we have less forward motion, less outcome in the real world, in the physical world, and more sort of, pondering, questioning, and really reevaluating what we feel and want to go forward with in each of those areas of our life. So I'll get into Saturn and Jupiter a little bit more in a minute. But right now we have Mercury, the moon, the sun, and of course Venus, all in Taurus. So we have 4 different planets here that are embodying this Taurus energy. And this is going to be a experience where we're really having, so what's the best way to put this? Taurus is a physical planet, right? It's an earth planet. It's an earth sign, excuse me, not planet. It's an earth sign. And this brings us to the physical world. Literally, that's why we see things like gardening and cooking, because we want to get our hands in the soil. We want to make things. The art that gets made with Taurus is oftentimes things that are very functional, or, sculptures or furniture that's art, or something that's either utilitarian or at least very physical, like a physical object of some sort. It's a place where we really do. Even if we do slowly, even if we can be kind of lazy about our doing, and even if the goal seems to be more about enjoying it than getting it done, we still see that things do get done. So having the ruler retrograde is, again, going to take away some of that doing. There's not going to be as much actual physical action that we would normally see. So with the moon and the sun there in a new moon cycle, we're still going to have that initiation, that experience of having this month come forward with all these, perhaps ideas or just ways in which we want to find comfort and stuff like that. But we might find ourselves going over what we've already done. So maybe you redesigned your house or redecorated your house while you were in it for the last couple months, and then you're like, oh, but was that really, did I want to move that like that? Was that really the most functional way to do this? Or is that making me happy? Is that making us more comfortable? Is that making our lives more harmonious? So really just calling into question some of the choices we've made. Maybe you've been gardening and your plants have been, flourishing and all of this, but you're starting to question, like, did you set it up right? Did you plant the right things? Are you doing your soil correctly? Are you using the right fertilizers? All these different things that come up for us when we start to evaluate. And we have a tendency to dislike retrograde. Whenever there's a retrograde cycle, we feel frustrated. Of course, Mercury retrograde is the famous retrograde that everybody really feels frustrated, but that has more to do with the fact that we use Mercury a lot in our lives. So we have a lot of communication in our lives, especially nowadays with computers and phones and all this kind of stuff. So when that doesn't work, it frustrates us. But with all of the retrograde planets, it's a frustration because we want it to output. We want to do things. And especially with something like this, where we have Venus in her own sign. Venus has a lot of intelligence in her own sign. It's where she's comfortable. And that's why for the last month, we've been really enjoying this energy of Venus in her own sign, where we can, plant, garden, eat, enjoy time with our friends and family, have some sensual pleasure, some sensory pleasure, and also make sure that other people are happy as well. This is when a planet is functioning with what we call intelligence. It's in good dignity. When it's retrograde, it's frustrating because we can feel all that good idea within us. We can feel all the ways we want things to be, but the outcome is not as much there. And the fact that we have to go over ground that we feel like we already went through is also kind of frustrating. If you're in a relationship and you're like, didn't we have these exact discussions, 2 months ago? Like, didn't we clear this and make this better? And now it's like, no, maybe not. Didn't I already go over this before? And if you are not in a relationship, or maybe even if you are, sometimes past lovers or past relationships come out of the woodwork. And it's another thing where you're just kind of like, isn't this over? Like, why do I have to deal with this again? And the reason is because something needs to be reevaluated. So maybe you need to look again at how why you ended that, or what went on in your communication in that situation. So going forward, it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily be with that person that you were with before, but it just means that you didn't quite fully integrate the lessons that you were learning. We didn't quite fully integrate why we did everything we did. And so we need to go over it again and just make sure that we feel confident about it. Make sure that we feel really good moving forward. Of course, in our, maybe rearranging your house, that might not be as frustrating for you, especially if you're still home. But for people in relationship, it can be really challenging because we often don't want to touch those trigger topics. We generally don't want to have any kind of strife or disagreement in our relationships. So going over ground that we thought was already covered can be really uncomfortable for us because we feel like, well, we had this discussion. I don't want to bring it up again because I felt really good that we put a lid on it, or that we ended it and we left things in a certain way. And now this person's like saying that maybe they don't agree to the terms we agreed to, or maybe they somehow are questioning what we decided on, and that doesn't make me comfortable or happy. And it could be you who's doing that, but it's still uncomfortable because you have to bring it up to somebody else and you have to deal with the other person the way they feel. And in Taurus, we generally, and also Libra, the other sign of Venus, we don't really want to deal with this disagreement. We just want things to be harmonious. We don't want to deal with all the pain and struggle of not getting along or having problems. We just want everything to work out and everything to be perfect. So that's going to be one of the challenges we deal with. Now, with things like Mercury being in Taurus, we have that positive communication still available. Mercury is not retrograde himself, but we do have the fact that the ruler's retrograde going to affect it. So while our communication might still be forthcoming, while we might, not have as many issues with that as we would in a Mercury retrograde cycle, the intention behind it, the intention behind our words and our communication are what we're still questioning, are what we're going through this process of sort of reevaluating, reconfiguring, or, reimagining. And because of that, our communication will have its own way of being sort of delayed also, or retrograde also, because what we're really feeling with regards to our happiness and our relationships is sort of internalized, and we're not as able to put it out. We're not going to be as good at expressing it either, or clearly saying what our intentions, boundaries, interests, or expectations are, because we're not totally sure ourselves. So this is something to be aware of in your communication, even though Mercury generally, you know, has very positive dignity here. And Mercury is at 26 degrees, so he's going to be moving out real soon here. And we also have Mercury and the moon breaking what we've been in called the Kalasarpa Yoga. So we've been in this time snake that has been enveloping all of us in this sort of otherworldly experience. It's almost like this crazy delusion cloud that has been over us, that's been sort of making our reality surreal. And of course, we've really experienced that. Like, I don't even need to ask if anyone's been experiencing that, because this has been a very surreal time, more than we could have imagined. So Mercury is the ruler of the North Node, which is leading this time snake. It's the nodes move backwards. So it's from Rahu to Ketu. And I'm going to show, actually, why don't I just go ahead and do that right now? I'm going to share the, what's it called? The chart, so that you can see what I'm talking about. So hopefully I'm going to share the chart if I can make this work. Right. There we go. Okay. So hopefully this isn't sideways for you guys. Sorry, it's my first time doing the Zoom for these videos. So it is a little bit sideways for me. I'm not sure if that's going to change if I turn it. We'll try. So you can see that Rahu has been leading this Kalasarpa Yoga right here where I'm highlighting, and it's going to Ketu here. And the yoga is that all the planets are in between these two nodes, and Rahu's moving backwards, Ketu's moving backwards. And so it's been a lot about Gemini type issues like information, you know, news sources, what's fact, what's fiction, what kind of agendas people might have behind what they're reporting or what news we're hearing, and this kind of thing. You know, what are we being told? What's the communication we're hearing and taking in? And also what's the communication we're putting out again? And of course, again, it's really obvious the ways in which we've been in this sort of delusional cloud around information. I don't need to, you know, tell anyone here that that's been happening. So what's going on here is that Mercury, and also the moon, but the moon moves around every month. So every month there's a period of time when the moon is out of this Kalasarpa Yoga. It's only between it when it's between Ketu and Rahu. So half the month the moon is out of it. So the moon will break free first and move into Gemini and then into Cancer. And then Mercury on the 28th will be just past the degrees. So it'll be here in Gemini in its own sign and just move out of the degrees of Rahu to be free. Some astrologers don't consider the Kalasarpa over until it's actually in the next sign. But I value it based on degrees, because you could see the hold start to lift. The effect will still be there of Rahu on then Mercury. Mercury will have that effect of the sort of confusion of Rahu, but the reaction of having all of them closed inside the snake is starting to break free. And since our moon in this case will be in Cancer on the 28th, we'll have, you know, we'll also have our psyche, our emotional and thinking self outside of it, as well as then the ruler of Rahu, the ruler of Gemini, Mercury outside. And since that's such a big deal, that buddhi, that discrimination, that capacity for discernment coming out is really a big change and shift that we're going to have as it steps outside of that Kalasarpa. And of course, you can see here, just while I have the chart up, the Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mercury all there in Taurus right now for this new moon. And Jupiter and Saturn are also retrograde. So that's something I'm going to talk about in a minute too. So I'm just going to go back to the screen if I can, and talk a little bit more about that. So with the step out of that, where we start to really be able to see more clearly again and experience information we're getting with a higher sense of discernment, With Rahu being joined Mercury, and even as we step out of the actual Kalasarpa yoga, like I said, Rahu is going to be right on Mercury at that point. It's going to be very close degrees. So there's going to be still that level of sort of delusion and confusion. But one of the things is that the nodes can give us a lot of insight. They can really provide us with this sort of download from other realms. More often than not with Rahu, it's sort of like it's like a futuristic one. With Ketu, with the South Node, it's more like from the past. These can be very valuable and very wise and very informative to us. The problem is it's hard to tell what is what. It's hard to tell, like, did I get this magical download that's really powerful, or am I living in a delusional state where I'm seeing everything with this really suspicious eye, which is a lot of what Rahu brings, is this really heavy sort of suspicion and a magnification of everything. Like, this is so crazy, but really, you know, if you see somebody looking at you a certain way, or they say something and you blow it up to mean all this stuff it doesn't mean, things like that really happen with Rahu. So we're going to have that happen when Mercury is joined Rahu, and when we're moving out of this Kalasarpa yoga, we're still going to have that magnification. But the chances that that particular planet will receive a higher level of insight at that point is going to be increased, because Mercury is going to be in his own sign. He's going to be in his ultra high intelligence. He's exalted actually in his other sign of Virgo. So it's not, you know, it's not his highest, but it's pretty dang high. And we're, you know, depending on what time of day and all these different factors, there's going to be a lot of yogas available, a lot of periods when we have the structural house rulers as well as the dharmic house rulers joined, just with that Mercury being in Gemini. So that in itself gives a power and a strength to the effect that the node has. Whereas with the node, with the ruler Mercury in the next door sign, or as it was before in Aries, and before that, definitely when it was in Pisces and debilitated, we see that Mercury itself doesn't have as much discrimination or as much intelligence. And while Mercury does really well in Venus's signs, one of the reasons is because it causes us to have really like functional conversation, because we're not angry, we're not fighting, we're not keyboard warriors, we're more likely to be harmonious, friendly, and want to come to some kind of agreement, which is helpful when we're trying to discuss something that we see both sides of an issue. But it does still have an agenda, and the agenda is getting along. And getting along is not the same thing as discernment. If you don't want to make anybody angry, and if you don't want to, you know, you're going to be less likely to say what you really mean. You're going to be less likely to even say something when someone else says what they really mean, because you're not going to want to rock the boat. You're going to want to make people happy. So, sorry, I'm using my son's large bricks, building bricks to prop this up. So when Mercury is in Gemini, we'll just have a more objectivity, more discernment that doesn't have an agenda. And that's really clear on, you know, what is right and what is wrong. And especially people who have a naturally pretty high Mercury in their chart will have that discernment gifted to them, but we'll all have a higher level of it available. So like I said, we also have Saturn and Jupiter retrograde right now. They all happened last week. It was all through the 12th, 13th, 14th. They all went retrograde. And retrograde, as I've discussed before, but I'll say it again, just for anybody who just came and joined the party, retrograde planets do not actually move backwards. We here on Earth see them as moving backwards because of the rate of speed of the planet moving versus the Earth. So at that point, the planet slowed down so much versus our speed here on Earth, or in comparison to our speed here on Earth, that they look like they're moving backwards. And the energy that we experience from their pull is delayed. It comes late. It's internalized. Like I said, it's not as much outward expression. So Saturn, like Venus, is in his own sign of Capricorn. This backwards motion, or this delayed motion, is going to be a problem for Saturn just as much as Venus, because we want to see the results that Saturn can do in his own sign. We have proper fear, we have humility, we have a capacity to move forward in a really committed way that's coming from a long-term goal that we see, that we want, that we know we need in order to fulfill our Saturn purpose of basically, you know, survival. There's awareness of time with Saturn. awareness of the fact that we're going to die one day or soon. So all of these things start to back up and become internalized. Well, what happens if you're, let's say you're, feeling a lot of fear around things and you're cautious and you're making cautious choices in the world. And then all of a sudden that energy backs up and internalizes. And now you're like, your fear's inside and you're thinking like, should I be fearful of this? Should I not be fearful of this? Maybe you're questioning, should I wear a face mask? Should I not wear a face mask? Meanwhile, while you're questioning that inside your own mind, you trip and fall on a huge rock right in front of you and break your knee. Because your fear wasn't in the right place. You were thinking about everything. You were questioning everything. You were wondering about all these different things that you had committed to previously. But in that process, you're not present to the actual danger in front of you right now. You're not present to the potential pitfalls that are there because you're too busy evaluating and questioning. And so the outcome of Saturn in Capricorn, which is, hey, we maybe take more care, we move more slow, or more, we're a little bit more humble in our actions, is suddenly, not producing results, and we're having issues. I work in a healthcare office of natural healing modalities, and in the last week since Saturn went retrograde, I've seen at least 10 different people come in and have serious injuries, like kind of random last minute injuries. My own son had several injuries again and again and again. He kept making the same mistake. He kept falling in the exact same way and not learning from his previous experience. These are examples of what happens when Saturn starts to go retrograde. Everybody's they're less aware of their mortality because they're more aware of it. It's like that heightened internalization of the energy makes the output, the cautious output, less functional in the real world. And the worrying is there. Did I make the right commitment? Did I do this? Is this, is my fear valid? Is my fear not valid? That's present, but it's internalized. It's not coming out into the world. It's not stopping you from tripping on that big rock. It's not keeping you from running into that wall. It's not allowing you to have whatever different way of lifting or standing or whatever the thing is that you did that made it so that you, kept your back protected. And of course, having both Venus and Jupiter also retrograde is going to add to that because there's many different levels on which we're not properly outputting our energy. So this is just, and also having Mars move out of Capricorn, having Mars move into Aquarius puts our anger in more of a mental realm, and we're not as physically present with our disciplined physical daily activity that we were doing when Mars was in Capricorn, which might have prevented some of our injuries or some of the things from happening that we, just by doing that daily diligence and having that strength and courage towards our long-term goal, we were able to maybe mitigate or prevent. So that's just something to think about. Jupiter being retrograde is a little bit of a different story. Jupiter's not in good dignity in Capricorn. Jupiter's actually debilitated in Capricorn. And while he's had a lot of help between the exalted Mars and Saturn in his own sign, he's still in that constrictive state where we see things from a fear-based perspective. And seeing things from a fear-based perspective when we're talking about our fear is really helpful. But when you see things from a fear-based perspective and it's about your hope and your inspiration, your ideals and your beliefs, it's really suffocating to growth and expansion. And it's suffocating to seeing the big picture. It's really hard to see the big picture when you're focused on what can go wrong and you're focused on death and time. How are you supposed to get beyond death to this timelessness that the high spiritual teachings teach when you're so focused on the fact that you will die and that these fears in front of you and this long-term goal towards survival as long as you can, or feeding your family or whatever. If that's your focus, it's going to be hard to pull back from that. So with Jupiter going retrograde, we have a very positive result. It's another form of Nichabanga. And Nichabanga is that modification that occurs when the debilitated planet is joined an exalted planet, like was when Mars was there, or joined the ruler of the house, as is with Saturn there. Well, now the ruler of the house is retrograde. So the ruler of the house isn't helping as much anymore. Now the ruler's kind of out to lunch himself, tripping over rocks. But Jupiter having that reflective state, having that delayed state, having that internalized state is helpful, because instead of outputting all these fearful ideals and even laws, rules, things like that, there's now a chance to reflect on that and be like, long term, like thinking about the long term, how is this going to work? How is this mindset going to hold over, a year or 3 years or 10 years or the rest of my life? Maybe not. Maybe I need to think a little bit more about what I was buying into and what beliefs I had, and how do I want to shift that to a state that's more expansive and one that's more based in truth. And by truth, I mean things that aren't facts. Facts have a problem in our world. The problem with facts is that they can change, right? If someone says the science is settled, a scientist would never say the science is settled, because the science is never settled. It's always open to somebody else reevaluating it and doing new studies on it. Facts are not 100% settled either. There's some facts really agreed on for a very, very, very long time that nobody's really looking to reopen for discussion, but they're still time-based. They're based on a specific time. If you looked at facts 1,000 years ago and what were considered facts to what's considered fact right now, we're going to see some differences. We're going to see that we've changed what is fact. And 1,000 years, 100 years, even 10 years from now, we're going to see that some of the facts have changed as well. Some of the things we all agreed upon are going to be now, realized as no, that wasn't true. Some of the things that we agreed upon that were true won't exist anymore. For example, if an animal is extinct, to say this is what an animal is like, and then the animal doesn't exist anymore. Well, those facts around that animal are going to be dramatically shifted by the fact that the animal is now no longer in existence. From a biological perspective, animals and plant life and humans and everything have evolved over time. So whatever was true about it then is not true anymore. So some of it's just natural evolution that takes place not only with plants, animals, and humans, but also with ideas and laws and the way countries work and all these different things. There's just so many levels to which we evolve. We 100% are not the same, even from 1 second to the next. But when you really count into years, even as much as 10 years, the face of those kind of things change quite a bit. So facts is a tricky word. Truth, and facts is really more Mercury's realm to discern facts, what's true, what's false. But still, it's more localized. It's more okay, in this time and place, this is a fact. But in the next time and place, that might not be true anymore. And truth from a Jupiterian perspective is a high truth. It's something that holds over time. It's something that's not going to change 5,000 years from now and is the same as it was 5,000 years ago. And that's a lot of what the Vedic teachings focus on. They are coming from a universal truth perspective. Sanatana Dharma, eternal truth, that which does not change, that which will not change based on time, circumstance, location, any of those things. So this kind of truth is really where Jupiter shines, when we're able to connect to that and find teachings and beliefs that relate to that. Through the Pisces part of Jupiter, we go inside with that energy and we find truth for ourselves and connect and merge with God, energy, whatever you feel comfortable calling it, ourselves. With Sagittarius Jupiter energy, which is the way Jupiter's heading in his retrograde motion, he's going back to his home sign of Sagittarius. Thank goodness for all of us. And that kind of connection to truth and wisdom is able to see, hey, look at them over there. They're doing this. Look at this culture. They're doing this. This is their way of doing this. This is their way. And how can we find truth that maybe is present in all of these different cultures or all of these different religions? Or how can we reflect our own belief system against that belief system and see something there and learn more and expand and grow? There's more room for growth and flexibility in the Sagittarius realm, certainly than the Capricorn realm, but it's different than in the Piscean realm, where it's more of an internal process. With Sagittarius, we're going out in the world and we're seeing what is already out there, and then weighing that against our own beliefs and finding that place where it fits and it works for us. So when you see, certain planets in Sagittarius, such as Saturn, who was there for a long, long time and unfortunately will be, ducking his head back in in this retrograde cycle, we see that commitment to our beliefs, and it becomes like dogma. It becomes like this, this is my belief and this is right and I'm right, and this sort of, anger around it. Similarly, you can see that with things like Mars, where Mars is sort of a militant presence and a very black and white, and, I'm fighting for my beliefs, even if they're not fully right. So when Jupiter is in Sagittarius, we have that capacity to have a little more generosity, magnanimity around our ideas and our beliefs. And we're definitely more expansive and able to understand them in a different way. So this Jupiterian retrograde period is overall something that we're going to experience in a more positive way. Everything is positive, negative in a very, it's more about how we experience it. Like, does it feel good is one way you can weigh positive and negative. Does this feel good or does this not feel good? The other way you can weigh positive and negative is if it brings you closer to that Sanatana Dharma, if it brings you closer to truth. If it does not bring you closer to truth, then it's not very dharmic. It might feel good and bring you away from truth. That is a lot of what we actually want in this world. Like, as individuals, what we want is to feel good, and we don't really care if it brings us closer to truth on a daily level. That's really true. Even for spiritual aspirants, a lot of times, you lose sight of that spiritual goal, and you want something that feels good now. The experience of things that feel not very good but bring us closer to truth is usually something we have after the fact. So after we get reamed or rolled through the ringer and we're just totally, tossed out naked and scared, that's when we're like, oh yeah, I think that did change my life, and maybe in a good way, but it sucked, it wasn't fun while it happened. So that's a lot of how we actually have our growth, is through these things that feel very negative, that feel bad, but they're actually good because they're bringing us closer to truth. So that's a lot of that experience. When I talk about Jupiter being retrograde, moving into Sagittarius, it's actually going to be a little bit of both. It's going to be both closer to truth as well as feel better, because Jupiter doesn't feel that good in Capricorn. It feels constricted. And the reason for that is because Jupiter is a benefic planet. It's a planet that feels good. We want it to feel good. So that's why Jupiter does its best work in good, positive feeling signs. So this is, just a little bit for us to reflect on as we go into this new month and this new moon, a new cycle. So it's starting something new, but it does have all this retrograde energy. So there's a lot of things that don't feel new, like feels like we're going over old ground. We're running over the past, and we're refiguring out things we thought we already had figured out. If you committed to a bunch of different things over the last month, maybe you were home and you had all this time and you were like, oh, I want to, do this, I want to do that. And you might be rethinking that. You might be rethinking those commitments you made. And some of us are going back to work. A lot of people are going back to work, and you might be rethinking how you want that to look and how you want moving forward for your life to be. And collectively, we're rethinking how this is all going to go, because there's a good chance that it's not like this is over, and there's not really a time and date that this is going to be over. It's more helpful to imagine how we're going to adapt to the future. And is it going to be, this picture that's being shown to us, or this picture that's being shown to us, or do we have that volition, that capacity to reveal a whole new possibility that hasn't yet been shown to us, that's maybe within each of us? And that's what this retrograde period can really be powerful for, because there's a lot of reflecting that needs to happen right now. Just moving forward when we have so much uncertainty is really not in any of our best interests. And as, again, we move out of that Kalasarpa yoga starting at the end of May, we're going to see ourselves clear a lot of the delusion. And any real powerful insights or downloads you had, you might want to write down or meditate upon. Keep some sort of journal for yourself of all this reflectivity and also all these insights you've had, so that you're able to go forward in a really empowered way later when the veil lifts. You don't just go back to sort of normalcy, whatever that looked like for you. So I hope this is helpful. Please always comment, share, like. It's so helpful to me to allow my word and my message and my thoughts and feelings and ideas to get out there to more people. If you haven't yet subscribed to my newsletter, go ahead and do that. We're going to have some great new free reports coming up soon. And I hope that you have a really blessed new moon and a reflective retrograde period, and a lot of things become more and more clear and revealed to you in this time. Namaste.